Football is always a game of risks and rewards, and in this encounter, Xabi Alonso was not shy of taking risks, and ultimately it paid off, as Madrid went 5 clear of Barcelona. So what were these risks, and what tactics did we see from both managers? Let's take a look. And there is a temptation when thinking about a great tactical performance to fixate on what a team does when they have the ball, but the most fascinating parts of Madrid's game plan actually came when they were out of possession, even as early as the Barcelona goal kick. Barca used their usual build-up shape, a back four with a double pivot, with Fermin Lopez remaining high so that essentially Barcelona was still roughly in their 4-2-3-1. And where under prior managers we might have seen Real be a little bit more conservative defensively, Alonso was on the front foot, refusing to be bullied. Real Madrid pressed ridiculously high, with Güler joining Mbappe on the centre-backs and Tchouameni and Bellingham on the pivots. So the only outlets for Szczesny would have been the fullbacks, but they weren't being given an inch to breathe either, with Kamavinga and Bellingham pushing right up, so that 6 Madrid players were immediately committed to the press. And what would the result of this be? Barcelona, if they went back to Szczesny, often had no outlet options, forcing Szczesny into long balls where the Militao-Huijsen pairing would be the favourites in the air. But things could get even better for Madrid, because Barcelona are Barcelona, and at times they would be willing to take risks in the initial build-up, meaning that with this much pressure, one wrong pass could get Madrid into a great goal-scoring position very quickly. And we see that here, where as soon as the ball is live, Mbappe cuts off the pass infield, so that now the pass to Balde is the only free option. Bellingham and Tchouameni cover both of the pivots, eliminating the central options, while Valverde is cutting out Rashford. So when Rashford does look to receive, he's forced backwards, allowing Real Madrid to win the ball and attack the box immediately. But when you commit this many players high up in the press, you yourself are taking massive risks. And in this rough 4-4-2, even if they hadn't been this aggressive, Madrid were already naturally 3 versus 2 down in the midfield, meaning with the high press, it was absolutely vital for the centre-backs, more often than not Huijsen, to push up on time to the free midfielder to prevent the line-breaking pass. But Real Madrid were playing with fire, because even early on, situations like this weren't uncommon. With the front 6 high, this time it's Ferran dropping between the lines, and both Valverde and Militao are drawn to the ball. And Madrid just about get away with it, as Valverde does get his foot to the ball, with Rashford lurking in behind. And again, Madrid were aggressive with the press, so things weren't always so rosy for them. And we also saw situations like this, where the Real Madrid front 6 are pressing in this familiar shape. But again, all it takes is one mistake or one lucky bounce, as we see Valverde forcing Rashford backwards as usual. But this time, a lucky break allows Rashford to find Balde, and essentially in 2 passes the press is completely broken, and Barca are immediately running at the backline and get into a great goal-scoring position. Or here, where Barcelona build down the right instead, and Kubasi finds Koundé. Crucially, Yamal and Fermin Lopez rotate, and Huijsen is dragged extremely high up the pitch, meaning essentially everyone but 2 defenders is in a high-risk pressing situation. This leads to a 3 versus 2 for Barcelona, and Madrid are fortunate La Blaugrana didn't make more of the situation. So essentially, the high press was a delicate equation. If they win the ball this high, it's almost certainly a high XG chance. But at the same time, if this initial layer of the press is broken, it's Barca who would be bearing down on goal. So how did things change when Barca were able to get a little higher up the pitch? In most encounters under Flick, we've seen Koundé generally be a little bit more ambitious in the attack, often looking to overlap late to support Yamal when he cuts in. But in this match, due to the ridiculous counter-attacking threat of Real Madrid, particularly down the left, Barcelona went with more of a 3 in the build, meaning that Balde and Yamal were tasked with holding the width, and overall it meant that Barcelona had a better rest defense shape. But the fundamental problem for Real Madrid defensively had not changed. Initially, it was a Bellingham-Mbappe front 2, and later a Güler-Mbappe front 2. But either way, Madrid consistently found themselves 3 versus 2 down in the midfield. And Fermin Lopez looked early on like he could be the key man, dropping in between the lines and causing Madrid serious problems. But Alonso, flexible as always, had 2 consistent solutions. When Barca were attacking more slowly and Real were in a more controlled defensive phase, Tchouameni would trust the midfield 2 to prevent progression into Pedri and De Jong. so it would be his role to drop in and follow Fermin Lopez as Madrid shifted into a back five. But if the play was coming down the Barca right, or the pivots just weren't well positioned to press, Tchouameni would have to push up, and it would be up to Huijsen to stay touch tight. And this could obviously cause issues like this, where Tchouameni pushes onto Pedri, meaning that Huijsen is on Fermin Lopez. But Lopez keeps drifting across the pitch, meaning Huijsen actually almost ends up on the wrong side of Militao, leaving a massive gap in the defense. But now, both Huijsen and Militao followed the run, meaning that Lopez can receive easily between the lines. But Barca just never quite had the quality in this encounter to take advantage of these situations. But credit should be given to the flexibility of the Real defense. As the match wore on, Barcelona increasingly committed to that 3-2-5 shape in the attack, with Rashford tucked in much more like Lopez on the far side, instead of providing the width. And this would have been one of the key reasons that Alonso moved Camavinga more to a right wing position, as the Frenchman's work rate meant that he would be happy to drop deep and help defend against the advancing Balde, now allowing these men in the half spaces to be monitored. This was especially important as Barcelona often liked to build down the left and overload the left-hand side. So now, when Real Madrid shifted across to cover, having a centre-back here able to watch Lopez in the half space meant that Yamal wouldn't be granted too much space even on the switch. At the same time, it also meant that Madrid now had a midfield three, so they were able to match Barcelona man-to-man on the occasions where Lopez was dropping into the midfield. And Real, as always, were happy to sit a little bit deeper like this because they knew they could be dangerous on the transition, particularly with these two breaking in behind Barcelona's especially high line. And Vinicius could make this particularly dangerous when he dropped initially to pick up the ball and drew Koundé higher up the pitch, as that would naturally grow the space in this area that Mbappe could target with the run in behind consistently. But this was very much a masterful out-of-possession performance from Los Blancos. And if you enjoyed this tactical breakdown, check out the top link in the description, which will take you to Tactics 12, which is my program that teaches you the basics of analysis absolutely free over the course of 12 days. But what did you make of this match? Drop it down in the comments below. And in this match, the approach from both sides on the goal kick was fascinating. And if you want a deep dive into how the goal kick went from being an afterthought to the most important tactical phase of play, check out this video by clicking on screen now.